All right, we have Kanshi back for another round of CloutTrends video interviews. Thank you so much for joining again. If you don't know Kanshi, you definitely should, but you can also go listen to our first interview. Kanshi founded Love4Src and a bunch of other new projects we'll talk about on BitClout. Been a big advocate for the developer community and the BitClout and now DeSo community in general, and how we move this project forward. So that's mainly what we'll talk about today. So, Kanshi, welcome. Any opening remarks?
Thank you for having me. Happy to be on the show for the second time. And oh, there are some interesting topics to cover today. No,
Absolutely, yeah. And so we definitely want to cover some of what was discussed at the DeSo town hall, and then a little bit about the upcoming developer program that is to be announced this week. But let's start with how you've been working with some of the nodes. So we talked first in the first episode on how you actually set up some of the nodes or running the configuration for some of the nodes. And now there's this node uptime tracker that I think is intended to help people understand what are reliable nodes to use. Maybe you can talk a little more about what people can understand from the uptime tracker and what that tells them about the ecosystem.
great question. Thank you very much for bringing it up. At first it was just some uptime tracker for that I've set up for Love4Src, but then we figured that okay, so we're starting to have multiple catalogs. But then having them updated is very cumbersome, and it's a solved problem. So we started adding new additional nodes. At first, it was only the nodes that I've been setting up for other operators, but ultimately we concluded that let's just add all of them there. Once we started having quite, let's say, over a dozen of nodes listed there, it seemed only correct to move one step forward. And we were thinking, okay, so how can we make it worthwhile for people to have working nodes, because we noticed how some of them were going down, that this excitement was falling off. So we figured, let's try to make a fund, and here Slava was a great and still is a great help to organize it. It was called Cloud4Source. Now it's called DeSo Labs. A little bit easier to remember, I think. But we're using this as a base to to introduce the concept of nodes into our community at large, to popularize that concept, and also make it easier for the node operators to to get themselves launched, because with this central bitcloud.com node, it's really hard for them to compete and gain some visibility. So we also transformed it into a fund, so people can donate to DeSo Labs, and we will distribute 70% out of that directly back to the active nodes that are listed on the uptime tracker. So it's also worthwhile to be listed on this tracker, and the remaining 30% we want to use for bounties and in general direct promotion of development. We would love for this to be just the first step of distribution of cloud, of distribution of recognition, right? Because we don't see this as payment itself, but rather, here's kudos to you for supporting this community. But then we imagine, once that fund starts to grow, perhaps those node operators can dedicate part of that cloud to pass it forward to, for example, to developers or to community operators that or community managers that help them run that node, because it's not only about the technical aspects of it. So we're trying to basically create like this wave of cloud that is flowing downstream and is creating a more stronger foundations for our ecosystem, right? Because once we have more nodes, those nodes are strong. Those nodes can have capabilities to evolve by themselves, and I think this is also an important topic that we should talk about today. Then we're starting to have the skeleton of the community, of the crypto community being built, right? Of course, there are some missing pieces, and I was looking forward to hear about them during the town hall. I think it might be still too early. I didn't hear them, but what I'm interested about is are those dynamics, right? So what is it like how do those node operators directly what is the financial incentive for them to run it? And here is an interesting trap, because people think that they should be able to charge on transactions, but perhaps it should be the other way around. Perhaps they should be giving clout on transactions, not taking clout on transactions.
So let's talk on that a little bit, because I think that's really interesting. What would giving clout on the transaction, obviously that would incentivize people to join the node, and people would want to be a part of that, but how would they fund that? So is that still the part that's missing? Is what would be their other the node operators financial incentive?
Exactly, that's what I'm saying, is that what we need to have is some sort of internal tokenomics, right? But not on the level of the users, of the end user, but here, because it's a social network, this end user is becoming more mainstream, let's say, and appears a different, significantly different role of the developer or of the node operator, so to speak, right? And also on top of that, there's the role of the miner. And so what I think, what we're trying to do with Cloud4Src, or now DeSo Labs, is to create those, like let's try to walk the path and see how we can define those good practices, like this template that people could perhaps replicate. This is also what we've been doing with Love4Src, right? So try to just create ways for people to grow the ecosystem at large.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about the nodes using templates, or what we could even say the front end code is normally just starts with a branch of that. How much is this affecting the uptime correlation across projects and nodes? Are you noticing that when a few go down, and that's probably not the front end code, but when a few go down, do you notice that it's multiple nodes, or are they isolated incidents? And if they are isolated, what's the difference between them that's keeping them not all going down at once?
I mean, first of all of the nodes that we have are standalone nodes, right? There is also a way how to use the BitCloud framework or BitCloud repositories in a way that you're just deploying the front end while the back end is shared among many. We treat them more like as a developer setups or some just proofs of concepts, right? So we expect a node in the full, in the sense that that node is running its own backend, at least one of them. This also means that every single one is self-sufficient, right? So they don't fall down, so to speak, together, which is good, because it speaks good of the resiliency of our network. But it does happen that there are times when it's challenging. Love4Src here is trying to be at the front of it, so I'm using it freely to test the new code that appears in the DeSo protocol repositories. And that means that sometimes I break things, which I'm very, very sorry about. But that's the risks and benefits of living at the edge. So both Tyne updated his node also in the pretty much the same time, a little bit like an hour earlier. I think he finished an hour earlier than I did. So there are nodes that are trying to push the envelope and make sure that it's easier for other a little bit more stable, let's say, nodes in all of that. But on overall, even if we look at the statistics, it's hardly noticeable. I would say right now we do stand in front of a big challenge because of a lot of renames happened in the code, in the API endpoints. Properties have been renamed from BitCloud to DeSo, which kind of makes it difficult because we need to do like a synchronized release. And so for example, now I need to schedule times with every single of node operators to make sure that they have the front end updated and merged with the new code base. So sometimes it's cumbersome, right? So we need to resync the databases, so the nodes are going to be missing some functionality for a while. But yeah, we're still early, so I don't think I haven't seen anybody complain about it. But yeah,
And quickly about the evolution of some of these nodes, and maybe take you out of your comfort zone and talk non-tech, but just in terms of what the user experience is and what's different about the nodes. Have you seen more divergence recently in what the nodes are doing with their front end and what features they're either hiding or adding?
I think now, especially people are started talking about the new front ends, right? So as much as, let's say, 2 3 months ago, people were not considering building their own front ends, rather working with the current one, and that was the default. Now, pretty much the expectation is that they immediately they start replacing it, making it first look the way that they want it to look, and second, add or remove features, as you mentioned. There initially there was a lot of feature removals because I think that's the easiest and fastest thing to do, and also people complain about things that not that something is missing, but oh, I don't want this to be here, right? I did a few tweaks just to make it easy for everybody, because they're like things like reserved profiles. They make sense for the bitcloud.com node. They don't make that much sense for external nodes, especially since they're not available. And so that might become confusing. Now I see more and more people, as I said, like starting, just the developers starting to work on those features. I see also first developers starting to ask about backend development. So those nodes are starting to have customized backends, but it's still future, right? It didn't happen yet, but I think it soon will. We see examples that are so I know I don't want to spoil the news, but I know at least one new node is coming this week, and I know at least one new node is getting a complete redesign in the upcoming weeks. Of course, there's the DeSo Foundation hinting us about the new redesign too, which is another thing. So I think in the upcoming weeks we're going to see a lot of new user interfaces. In that sense, yeah, I think we're basically working. All of us are working to mature and grow the technology ecosystem. Right? There's not necessarily focus on specific features, but I would say the foundations, right? So, and we saw that also in the town hall, right? People were not that much interested in one feature or another, rather in the general strategy, approach, governance, that kind of. At least that was what I saw. I don't want to say on the chat.
Yeah, there was too much going on in the chat, right? To follow. It was we
It was
needed
so
to
much fun.
slow that down a little bit. But
It
yeah,
was perfect. I loved it.
it was a good time, and it was fun. And I think talking a little bit about the DeSo town hall. Let's get into a few of the things that were announced, and then also you mentioned a new node coming. Is this? Do you think this is the same node that Nader was talking about that we should expect coming? That would be a big deal and potentially a replacement for
That's not
bitclout.com.
that's not the node that I was talking about. I'm sure that one's coming too.
Okay.
But yeah, I was more thinking about the node that I'm setting up, and it is rarely a week when we don't get one or two new nodes. So yeah, it's we're growing as fast as we can, I would say. Yeah.
That's great. And so let's talk about that growth and what you think the developer program might do for that growth. I know we don't have any details yet, but hopefully this week. What are you expecting, and what are you maybe not expecting, but you think would be valuable?
That's a great question. We've been going. I mean, I've been going about this topic for a while. Perhaps not taking into consideration, or like not taking the perspective of the DeSo Foundation, right? But taking rather my perspective. What can we do to grow, and what are the blocks that just basically make developers ignore the project somewhat. The first thing I would say is the ease of entry. So it's like to start developing. Yes, there's documentation, everything is fine, but where are the SDKs, right? So it's not enough for us to have the documentation, but we actually need to get out of the way, right? So expecting that developers are going to be developing something that is specific for BitClout is essentially this barrier that we need to cross, right? Developers should be developing products, right, on top of BitClout, using the SDKs, using the frameworks, perfect, right? But not having to connect to those things, right? And that's not only a technical challenge, but it's also organizational and business challenge. So we already have over 100 apps, but we need to see how those apps can be supported by the ecosystem and integrated into that ecosystem, right? Only a few of that 100 apps are integrated into the main node. Only Cloudcast is integrated, I think, on in several tools, right? So I think there's work to be done there that can be shared among all, right? So this is the value that I see that we can reach for, is have a integrated ecosystem rather than ecosystem of 100 plus apps, ecosystem of 100 plus integrated systems with each other that play in unison on top of the blockchain, right?
Do you see that?
Mhm.
Sorry, I was going to say, do you see that happening through submitting PRs to the main code base, kind of like Cloutcast did, where people could still take that if they would, or do you see that as something that sort of bypasses the core repositories and you build that out separately so the other node operators can share amongst themselves?
That's a great question. I mean, the PR is great. It's a great first step. Ultimately, what I think we should have some sort of simple to follow interface, like programmatic interface for that type of modules, right? So it's not a matter of writing a PR and then, because the problems with PRs is that, I mean, this PR might be great, but down the line, the 67th one in a row from Brutal, for example, it might be a troll submission, right? There is more to that dynamic that we need to watch for, and be and not to just have the expectation that the PR is going to come, but we need to provide some sort of an incentive to have a reasonable expectation or high chance of people actually willing to do that, right? Or even being able to increase the stakes such that that PR is more valuable or more tempting for somebody to get involved with, right? There are a few layers to this. I don't want to to get into too much detail, but essentially it's again those coin economics or tokenomics within the network that would incentivize the work that is being done for the network itself, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that's so important. And some people go out and build first and then hope to get some sort of benefit later. But I think, the argument has been we want those people, not the people who are looking for funds first. But honestly, I don't think that's always valid because the world runs on incentives, and a lot of these other
I
major
think there
projects incentivize to get the work done.
Sorry, I think this is a slight misunderstanding. So, of course, this advice is very sound, right? We cannot start interacting with builders that first want to amass assets and then, figure out how well they can spend it. That shouldn't be the way to go, and not because those assets are gonna go better or worse. The point is that there is no incentive that can be followed, right? So what we need to do is we need to put ourselves into a situation, or put developers in a situation in which they can start consuming an incentive that is not overwhelming, right? So it always have to be a level playing field, right? So, but then when somebody has, let's say, 10 users and is providing this amount of value, that value should be, we need to enable that the transfer of that value essentially, and facilitate the transfer of that value. And that's all there is. And at this point, what I see is that there are no mechanisms for the transfer of such value between let's say the user level and the technical operators level. And I think that's also something obvious to expect, because so far the technical operators of the network, they did not expect many financial incentives beyond the fact that people would buy clout, right? But now we have technical operators who do not have vested interest in just clout on its own, right? Because they don't have the pre-mine or whatever it is that they would value, right? So in that sense, the situation changed a little, or changes a little bit, and we need to find additional tokenomics. And I'm not saying that people need to be paid money. That's not what I'm saying. We need to find like something like diamonds, or like what maybe I think hinted that this like this cut on the transactions, right? But I'm not sure if that's the final solution, right? It's good. It's an obvious direction, but
Yeah, I mean,
perhaps we can do
I
better.
think that's why people tilt towards transaction, percentage of transaction is because it's such a common model. But I do agree with your statement earlier that in order to get the adoption and the network effects we're looking for, it's almost makes sense to invert that and say, the node operators should be providing the users an incentive to use the node. So I'm definitely going to think more on that. But I think it's totally valid and beyond what the developer program will offer, because that might be more of a one-time thing or a not sustainable thing over the long run. But we do want to help get people started, so I am quite interested in what that announce is coming. Let's talk a little bit about your team a bit. You had mentioned, I don't know if you want to discuss this, but you had mentioned maybe the team would be growing a little bit, maybe some new additions, maybe some new direction. Any updates to share on that, or you can pass if you want.
Oh, the team grew just recently. We got Titan joining the Love4Src crew. We got Sean Slater joining the Love4Src crew. I mean, we've all been known each other for a while by now and talked on several occasions, and it's more symbolic, I think, than means that they have any special duties in any sense. No, but it means that we see eye to eye and we want to push specific areas forward. We did have some very interesting discussions surrounding Love4Src and the activity that we have. And just to recap, we have, let's say, like I see it now as like three pillars. One is the Love4Src and the community of software makers, developers, and like all the things that is happening there. The communication, the wiki, like that kind of stuff. Let's say social content. Then there is the DeSo Labs, which we see as like a community of node operators, like building those nodes, deploying those nodes, helping readapt the Love4Src repository towards the needs of the node operators, or facilitate communication between those node operators. Because again, that might not be obvious, but that communication has to be like semi-private, because it's like kind of professional communication, so you don't want to have all of that flying around in the open, but parts of that communication should travel between those node operators, right? So I hear myself saying, oh, there's an opportunity incoming because these guys are working on, let's say, a language module, right? So perhaps you can use it later in your own. And then the third pillar is the DeSo Ninja, which is my, let's say, automation bot that I'm doing to support node operators. Again, like the first feature are the international language feeds, which I'm now working to make them a little bit more personalized by, let's say, person creates an account with DeSo Ninja and can personalize the feed for their language, right? That would be embedded in the node as one of the feeds that is more automatic than let's say the global feed right now, right? So we want to develop specific tools like content labeling, like user reputation monitoring, and offer those as supplementary services to the node operators, but in an automated fashion, right? So those would be let's say the three main areas of Love4Src.
Yeah, so let's maybe try and summarize those. So Clout4Source or Love4Source is the app, maybe the app builders and the broader dev community, and just let's call it builders. Then we have the DeSo Labs, previously Clout4Source, which is about node operators and
And more
supporting
like
node
this
operators.
professional, yeah, and more like this professional aspect, right? So, and yeah, sorry. Go. Mhm.
I mean, we can dive into it a little bit deeper, but and then DeSo Ninja is about automation, and that's, would you call that something that spun out of DeSo Labs, or is that a personal project? How do you describe that?
That's more as a personal project of mine, but all of these, at least in my head, they work under the umbrella of Love4Src. So team members have access to the source code also of the DeSo Ninja, right? Perhaps not everybody, the whole world, but definitely like trusted community members. I'm happy to evolve it. Right now, I'm doing it, or funding it from my own pocket, but I mean, if it starts working on its own, I think people might see more value in it and perhaps will want to join, and then we can see how we can create those additional or revenue split, or however we wanna do it, right? We're definitely looking towards creating a company out of Love4Src. I mean, this is also what I do. Like, I'm a startup builder, so to speak, like a technical one. So right now it's under the umbrella, let's say, of my startup studio, but it's not, of course, always at some point, like when the business is starting to develop, and this is what seems to be happening here. Yeah, the company is being founded, and yeah, so I'm also happy to have so many people on the team. I guess some of them will want to be more involved, some less, but definitely once we all grow, it's going to be more places to, and more incentive, so to speak, to be involved and help the community.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about structure, because you are a startup studio guy, and maybe you have some thoughts on founding the company, as whether it's a DAO, whether it's in a specific domain, rather than a Delaware corp. What are your thoughts on the best structure for a startup in the space? And maybe you can just share your thoughts generally. It doesn't have to be what you'll do, but I have asked some other projects that were looking to start the company on what they were planning to do, and not many were willing to share yet. So, do you have
I
thoughts?
would say, I would say, and I'm saying this as a person who created quite a few companies on my way all around the world. Uh, I would say keep it simple. Like, make like at the beginning, like, you don't need it. Don't optimize prematurely. You need a company. Just create the simplest form that you can find on the market right now. So that you have a number and you can pay the bills. That's what I would say. And then when you need more, the same way, like, get the easiest accountant or lawyer. Like, just get it out of the way. Don't overthink it. That's not the goal, right? The goal is somewhere else. And I think it's just a technicality, basically, and I think many people overthink it. I was also the one who was overthinking it plenty of times, and it's just not worth your time. Like, I mean, look at BitCloud or look at DeSo now, right? It even didn't have the right name for over,
Well, it
for
didn't even
years.
have a legal corporate structure, a legal entity.
Exactly,
Actually,
exactly,
that
exactly.
was really surprising for me to hear. I mean, they definitely had. They must have had something in place, to be able to sort of have the expenditures running through. But maybe it was like Natter's personal LLC or something, which would be fair.
Exactly.
But yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
that's common in the US here. You just do an LLC. You can convert to a C corp when you do a raise, because that's what's required for a VC. But
Yeah.
I'm more interested in whether the DAO is an interesting organizational structure for some of these projects, given that we're operating in the crypto space and the blockchain space. Do we see companies
For sure.
forming traditional corporations, or do we see them becoming DAOs?
For sure. I think what is going to happen is that essentially what we have is a set of general rules, right? So we're going to see more corporations or more companies that are formed with specific put in place dynamics rather than general terms and industry standard clauses. That, I think that's the best way to put it, right? So we're going to see how this profit is divided live daily, not quarterly or yearly, right, and distributed, right? So definitely I think there's going to be an integration of this technology into the corporate law defining or the law defining companies. When is that going to happen? I think that's still an open question, but at the current stage people could have an agreement that yes, and we will follow the contract defined on Ethereum blockchain number, yada yada yada, whatever, right? So it's definitely already possible to achieve, and I think what is more interesting is what is happening within those DAOs, right? So what are the solutions and that are being developed and deployed, and I think that's what we're still discovering, right? With the organization of work and the delegation of work. An interesting case here was I don't know if that's still the case, but at some point I've heard that Amazon was organizing all of its units such that the unit has to have a clearly defined API, and the communication has to happen through those APIs. And I think it's especially important for us to think when we're thinking about crypto or blockchain operations, is that most of those operations are automated, right? But some are not. Some could involve humans, and especially in social networks, they do involve human writing something really nice, such that others get inspired and commit value to it. But what we can have is, if that is flipped around, so it's not that APIs are consuming the humans are consuming the APIs of the computers, but the computers are consuming the APIs of humans, then we're moving forward in automation, and ultimately we're gonna have the social network living by itself and humans just enjoying watching the show. But yeah, we'll see.
Well, I'm in Seattle, and I have a bunch of insider knowledge at Amazon, and there's definitely, I can confirm that there are a few business units that are using the method you mentioned of API communication. I'm not sure that it's
probably not that widespread. Yeah.
I'm not sure it's widespread yet, or even a rule that's enforced, but definitely it makes sense, right? Humans are a big friction. I was actually talking with Jason Devlin of CloutCast. We were posting about, I forget what the topic was, but I just made the comment that I want to remove all human friction. Like, any human touch when not necessary is we can remove that. And I said, just don't tell my wife about that. But like, we remove all human touch when possible. I think that's good, and that's going to be something that speeds up the process.
Especially in those infrastructural processes, right? I would hate people to misunderstand us and think that we want to get rid of people from the social network. Yep. I was joking before. That was a joke, guys. No, I mean, we're talking about the automated processes and how the internal incentives are defined. That it's not on somebody's goodwill that there is value that is flowing, is because of some demonstrated ability to do something, or because of some achievement, or because of some value that is being delivered to the ecosystem through the technology or CPUs, electricity, whatever.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about the humans on DeSo, and maybe we'll finish on this note. Is let's do some speculating. Probably not, but either of our areas of strong suit, but like, the composition of people on DeSo and previously BitClout, what percentage of them do you think are tech savvy folks, or maybe even you can go with developer, then sort of broader tech savvy, versus, I don't know, maybe artists, or even just what we might call users or browsers. How do you think you have any sort of notion in your mind of like a pie chart of what that composition looks like?
To be honest, I was surprised recently because several people told me, "Oh yeah, by the way, you don't need to talk to me like a complete noob. I'm also some sort of a technical stuff. So I think there's a lot of hidden gems, so to speak, that are not necessarily publicly declared developers or architects or product managers. I think still there is very few. I think lower count of percentages,
So you think the
5%, right?
developers are around 5% or less
Or
than
even
10%
less.
of.
Like, to be honest, because the issue I think with a lot of developers is that, so who is doing it full time and who's doing it as like a, just jumping up and saying, okay, so I'm a developer, but I'm not really using my skills because I don't have time, right? But I am still a developer. I could, of course, but I don't know how to switch, right? How to jump into the rabbit hole and find yourself on the other side of the mirror and then survive, because that's the hard part, right? Everybody can jump in, quit their job, but what to do next, right? And so this is also those dynamics that I think we should work on, those templates that we should provide and demonstrate to people how to do that, right?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some places where I've wanted to jump in, and kind of at the high level. I used to be a DB admin at Microsoft, but I'm not.
Another one.
It's
Okay, here you go.
it's been a really long time since I've used my skills. So, but when Postgres came about, I was looking at diving in and saying, I could at least do some data analytics, see what's going on
Yeah, exactly.
and highlight some of the trends there. But I think I was talking with it's Aditya. I don't know how to pronounce his name, and he's doing a Python library that I think his impression was that it wasn't that easy to get the Postgres set up, and that it would actually be easier to just use this Python connector. So I'm waiting for that, and then I might kind of try and dive in a little bit. But as you mentioned, it'll be sort of a small time endeavor, maybe a personal project for me. We really do need those people who are saying we're going to come develop on DeSo full time. And how do you view that we get those people? Do you think that comes in to the DeSo Foundation, through the DeSo Foundation website or funnel, and or do you think they get inspired by some of the apps?
I think I think the inspiration from the apps is going to be hard because they're both good and bad examples, right? So developers are very grounded in their thinking, and they're gonna try to evaluate, and also a lot of opportunities. Let's say the low-hanging fruit has been taken, right? So there's no point in making another Prosper Cloud. There is no point in making another CloudVit, right? Or Jump Cloud or whatever. There are several tools that have been made, and we need to focus on integrating those tools into the ecosystem rather than trying to promote creation of new ones. But on the other hand, of course, we need more tools, right? And how to get there. One of the moves that were made by the core team was the Postgres, as you noticed. I don't think that's a finished deal yet. It was announced as a beta, and I think it also kind of works like a beta. So that might help, but that's still the future. I think what we need to do is we need to again give people SDKs. So something like it's Aditya created in Python, right? So wrappers basically, not to have to go too far away from the regular path that the developer is taking. If for that particular case of your data analytics, if that's easier than just connecting to the database, I'm not sure what you're trying to do. But again, like Love4Src is trying to help people and onboard and like get up to speed. What we do is we offer access to the PostgreSQL database that is maintained by us, which, by the way, I need to make sure that it's synced. But if you have one Love4Src coin, one of the benefits of those coin holders is the access to the PostgreSQL that is hosted on our servers. So again, like trying to make it easier to start, right? Or the fact that if you clone the front-end repository, it's going to automatically connect to the API that is on our servers, rather than you having to set up yourself the backend on your machine, which might be more or less challenging and more or less related to what you're actually trying to do with the DeSo framework or the DeSo blockchain. There are many paths, and I think we need to start documenting and making it super easy for people to walk those paths. Just drop in replacements, SDKs, and just move on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the infrastructure you're providing is a great step, and we need to figure out how to support that. And I think a really key point you make is integrating the apps we already have. I'll make a note on CloutVid. One of the things I think is lacking is the ability to see who in real time is in a room or something. For example, one of the things that I think makes Twitter Spaces so popular is you come onto Twitter and you see who's in a space, and so it's like you're already doing something else but you get notified about the space. And I think that's what Clubhouse is lacking, is no one comes to Clubhouse for something else and then notices that a room's going on. They have to come there
Hmm.
specifically for a room, unless they have notifications enabled, but that kind of gets
Yeah,
overwhelming from
that's
Clubhouse. But like, for Twitter Spaces, I found it very useful because I come in to do something on Twitter and I see that there's a space going on, and I might sort of hop in a
mhm.
more spontaneous fashion. I think the same thing could happen with CloutVid and BitClout. Is I come on and maybe I come on to CloutFeed or an app I'm using, and I say, oh, there's a space going on or a CloutVid going on with Kanshi. Like I should just jump in there. I got a few minutes. So I think that type of integration is going to help the ecosystem a lot. So I think you're spot on there.
I think also it's great examples. The way that I think about it is that we are now, as humanity, we are crossing the virtualization barrier, in a sense that 10 years ago we were living in a physical world. Now we're living in a virtual world. You and me, we're now doing shows in the virtual world. I'm not meeting people in the physical world, right? I don't, like my context has moved over the last decade almost entirely into the virtual space, right? And now the challenge that I see ahead of us is making sure that it is one virtual space, not a set of fragmented scenes, fragmented experiences, right? And I'm trying to face that problem also in virtual reality with the virtual world astronation that I'm building, right? To have a sufficient amount of degrees of freedom, so to speak, for the user to not only express themselves but also be able to interact with others on multiple different layers, be it economical, social, entertainment, performances, watching, learning, knowledge acquiring, like trading assets, many different dynamics that are present here. All of those we expect from a social network, right? Because we see that social network as this one unified, obvious environment, and the one obvious in a sense, the one that we as humans we understand, right? And we, the parallel with the regular world is very natural, right? We can bump into a store, we can bump into a crazy dude, we can bump into some very interesting art, right? And so we need to translate that somehow into this new medium of the, not only of the web, of the mobile, but also of the virtual reality, because that's the future I hope we all are gonna see very soon.
Yeah, well, there's definitely some folks working on it, even in context of DeSo, with virtual
Yeah,
galleries. And
yeah,
I think, I'm really excited for supporting all these projects, and looking forward to what we get as an announcement for the developer program. I think we'll have to
definitely.
do it. We'll have to do a quick sync after that just to, see what can help, and maybe, I think there will be some opportunity to help people make use of the developer program. I've seen this in the past where projects don't think they qualify, or
Yeah.
they kind of are not, making full utility of that. And we want to make sure that everyone's making the maximum progress they can. So we'll definitely regroup after that. I really appreciate you coming on. Any final things to discuss? I know we covered a lot, and I'll try and do a little post summary of this just so people who don't watch the video can still get the good content.
Keep on rocking, and that's what I that's what I would say. Like, let's keep on building the future. I mean, we are the people who are literally building the future of social that we are gonna be consuming, and our kids, and so yeah. I mean, I would say there's no time to wait. Let's build, and let's let's rocket this ship. Yeah.
Yeah, I think to that sentiment, one of the anonymous accounts, or not anonymous, but pseudonymous accounts, T plus zero, wrote a blog post about how he was early at Ripple and just realized that he had to leave whatever he was doing to focus on crypto because it was the future. And I think he was directionally very correct, and now he's mentioned in this blog post, he's here, sort of watching DeSo because he thinks directionally this is the future. So I think that's great to hear from someone who's had so much success at calling the bets right, and I think we'll start to see more of those folks. Thank you so much for being here, and thanks for building the future. And we got to do it together.
Thank you very much for having me, and see you on the blockchain. No?
Sounds good. Take care.